on saving money to buy more weed, we'll be making our own XLR cables. As you very well know, I'm not that interested in audio cables and the like, but when it comes to saving money to buy more weed, well, I'm all for it.
See, look, all these states that are colored in are moving towards marijuana legalization. Yup, that's right. Even New York's finest is joining in on this new movement.
So I'm saying this could be a really important thing. I mean, right? Especially with all the great new attributes in our community and neighborhood.
Affordable and accessible food, fair and affordable housing, newly discovered neighborhoods, fast and reliable commutes to and from work.
I mean, who doesn't love to ride behind a Google bus going 60 miles per hour in the fast lane from San Francisco to Mountain View?
Bruh.
So anyways, since you can't save money on your commute to your non-Google job, here's a way to save some money for weed. That's right, you can suck on weed after you suck on Google fumes.
So before you can start making something, you'll need to buy a few basics. Finding a decent set of male and female XLR connectors is going to be your first step. I personally went online and purchased a 20-pack of GLS Audio male and female connectors for about $29.99 a box. There are cheaper and more expensive connectors out there, but be careful not to sacrifice quality for price. Basically, don't pay too much for something you don't need. Save it for weed. You'll also need a roll of mic cable. Pay attention to the gauge of the cable, because that tells you how thick it is. I went with a 16 gauge, but a 12 gauge is also good. I got 250 feet for about $75. Damn! You're also going to need a soldering gun, some solder, and a solder sucker. Don't forget the solder sucker. You're going to need it, trust me. For the iron, I recommend getting one with an adjustable heat element. I personally went with the Weller WS51 soldering station, which I got for about $90. For solder, you'll want solder that has a 60-40 rosin core and lead-free. I got a 4-ounce pack for $5. I spent $30 on a Behringer CT100 cable tester, and for solder sucker, I spent about $8 on an Avon 17537 desoldering pump with anti-static tip. Lastly, a small screwdriver that I happen to have on hand. That didn't cost me anything. While the following items are not necessarily needed to start making your own XLR cables, they will definitely make your life easier and give you much more quality cables. A pair of wire strippers is almost a mandatory tool. Not only can you use them for stripping away the insulation on your wires, you can use it to cut wire. I use the 8-inch Irwin Tools Vice Grip Multi-Tool Stripper, Cutter, and Crimper. They can also be used as an extra pair of hands. Speaking of extra hands, I picked up the SE MZ101B Helping Hand Magnifier for around $6.50. And yeah, helping hands work great for double doobie destroyers. Oh shit!
While it's tempting, and I mean really tempting, to use the double doobie destroyers, it's probably best to only use it to hold your wires in place. Not to mention all the nasty, toxic, metallic residues this stuff tends to produce. So yeah, don't lick your fingers either.
But look on the bright side. If you burn your place down, there's plenty of new affordable housing being built across the city as we speak. And if you're not in a rush to move into your new loft apartment conveniently located above a Whole Foods, you can leisurely lumber on the luxurious artificial turf under the serene new night lights at Golden Gate Park as you get close to nature.
Bruh.
A scalpel or a razor blade can really come in handy if you need to cleanly cut away any extra insulation or tape. And yeah, it works great for cutting stale cigars. I got mine for $1 at a 99-cent store. Black electric tape, electric wire shrink wrap, and a hot air gun are not mandatory for making your own XLR cables. However, having them will definitely help you make a better XLR cable. The tape I was lucky enough to have lying around the house. I spent $7 on the Anytime Tools 48-piece heat shrink tubing wrap sleeves assorted pack and $23 on the ECG HG300D mini heat gun. In this video, I'll show you how to use some of these items.
Now that we have all the tools we need, the real work begins.
Following this brief intermission.
It's late. My project is late. It's late. Is that thing on? Oh, shit!
The first thing you want to do is make sure you're working in a clean and clutter-free environment. If your workspace resembles this, you're not ready to start. If your workspace resembles this, you have a really clean workspace, and I suspect this is your parents' house. But no, seriously, before you start messing around with this stuff, you want to make sure that your workspace is free of anything that might cause you to trip, pull something over, or overreach. Make sure to place down a piece of cardboard, a thin piece of plywood, or some other material so as to protect the surface you're working on. Some of the elements we're working with are extremely hot and can burn down your home or workplace. If this is your boss or you work at Google, you can disregard this last step. Now we start prepping the cable. So you can see, carefully using the scalpel, I remove about an inch of the outer rubber insulation, being really careful not to cut into the copper wire shield braiding underneath it. Next, using one of the small screwdrivers, carefully so as not to break off any of the strands, I begin to unbraid the exposed copper shielding. You should notice two smaller wires in the center of the braided copper shield. Once you've unbraided the copper wire to the point where you originally cut the rubber insulation about 1 inch down, carefully but snugly twist the loose copper strands into one solid piece. You should now have 3 separate wires protruding about 1 inch from the cable, a copper wire and 2 colored wires, a hot wire which is often red or white, and a cold wire which is usually black. In all actuality, you can use either of the colored wires as hot or cold. The important thing is that you remain consistent. Using your wire strippers, remove about 1/4 inch of the insulation covering each of the smaller colored wires. Now twist the stripped ends carefully but firmly together. The copper, the hot, and the cold. Now we can begin soldering. We begin by placing the cable in the helping hands clamp with the 3 wires spread out. First, heat up the tip of the wire by placing an iron on it. Be careful not to melt the remaining insulation while you're doing this. Once the wire has become hot enough, place a little bit of solder on the end of the wire. If it's heated correctly, the solder should flow and spread evenly around the tip of the wire. Repeat this process on all 3 wires, then repeat this process on the other side of the cable. First, completely disassemble both of the XLR connectors. Make sure to keep their components separate. You'll notice the backside of a male and female XLR look exactly the same. They both have 3 small cups with an even smaller corresponding number, 1, 2, or 3, embedded in the plastic next to them. No, I'm not kidding, the numbers are really small and they really are important, but more on those numbers later. Now we will tin the cups of the male and female XLR connectors. Clamp one of the XLR connectors into the helping hands. Hold the tip of the soldering gun to the bottom of one of the cups and heat it up. With your other hand, place some solder onto the top of the cup. As the gun heats up, the solder will melt and flow to fill the little cup up. Melt enough solder to fill the cup, but not too much so that it spills over the sides. Repeat the same process with the other 2 cups. Now repeat the same process with the other XLR connector.
Step 4.
Remember those tiny little numbers I said were important?
Yeah.
If you haven't seen them yet, place the magnifying glass on the helping hands over the back of the XLR connector and look again. Yup, see them right there? That's it, a 1, 2, and 3, each corresponding to the ground, hot, and cold wires we're gonna solder. Here goes another diagram showing the XLR connector assignments. Note how the male and female numbers are not identical but exact mirror images. For example, if the pin 1 is on the right side on the male, the pin 1 will be on the left side of the female XLR.
Step 5.
Before I solder my wires into the cups, I like to put a little electric wire shrink wrap in place to ensure I have complete isolation of each wire. Not to mention, it just looks good. Next, align one wire at a time to its corresponding cups, using the helping hands to hold the wire and XLR connector cup in position. Tighten the clamps on the helping hands, reheat the solder in the cups with the soldering iron, and as the solder becomes liquid, press the wire into the cup. Once the wire moves into the cup, immediately remove the solder iron. Repeat the same process with each cup, being sure to keep the correct pin to wire assignment. Now with your heat gun,
Look, I know we're trying to save some money here, but that's just not gonna work.
now come on, you gotta be kidding me. You don't need an anti-aircraft gun to solder wires, but at the next HempCon though, that thing will definitely come in handy.
Okay now, let's stay on track. We're almost finished here.
Now using our heat gun, yeah, that's right, that's the right one. Aim the gun at the black plastic shrink wrap. You'll notice that the black plastic shrink wrap will actually shrink. That's what it's supposed to do. While some people like to use a lighter for this, I wouldn't recommend it. The components you're using are really small and you don't want to heat up the wrong thing. You also don't want to hold the gun on there too long. You'll see in this video that's exactly what I did. But I did that for the video's purpose, because I really like this beat. Now that we've soldered our wires in place and we've got our cool looking electric wire shrink wrap, now all we have to do is slide the boot up.
Okay, I can't believe it, but I forgot to put the XLR boots on the cable before I started soldering. Now I'm gonna have to undo all the nice work I've done, and I'm gonna have to cut off my cool electric wire shrink wrap.
Remembering to put the XLR boots on before you start soldering is important if you want to spend money on weed and not solder an electric wire shrink wrap. If you were fortunate enough to remember putting the boots on first, then you would see all you have to do is screw the boots into place. Now go ahead, celebrate, congratulate yourself. You've now made an XLR cable. If you're from Google, you can now lick your fingers.
Yep, that's right. I stay with the XLRs now. Everybody knows what I have, and I have quality cables. I mean, I literally carry around and sell these things everywhere I go. You never know what could happen when you might be needed.
Do you have friends who sing or are in a band? They think it's all fun and games until the unforeseen attacks and brings the show to a halt. Who just so happens to have a spare XLR for sale in their bag? That's right, you do. If you come through like that, you'll be your buddy's hero. Just don't let them see you call your dog when you leave.
Who you suckers think you're tripping with? Yes, I'm the boss.
Yeah, it's true, I can't even front. I've been living this XLR life for a while now, man. Some people think I'm into loan sharking, gambling, or something like that, but it's all just rumors. I'm moving almost 200 yards a week. Even the cops were shocked, especially when I told them I had the plug. Probably not the best way to advertise. You should have seen the look of shock on his face though when he saw my stash. That's right, a bag full of XLRs.
Thank you everyone for watching my video. Please like it by clicking the thumbs up in the corner and subscribe to my channel to watch more awesome videos on how to save your money to buy more weed.